Trustee Anselmo.
Here.
Trustee Berger.
Here.
Trustee Zalick.
Here.
Trustee Gizer.
Here.
Trustee Frizzaloni.
Here.
Trustee McCarthy. Mayor Severino.
Right over you. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. And I know everybody's so excited to talk about budget, so we'll get underway. Tonight, we're here to primarily discuss the village's water and sanitary sewer fund. This is the second of two, what we refer to as operating funds in the village budget, with the general fund being the other one. While in total, the water and sewer fund for fiscal '25 is only about 40% of the size of the general fund. I'm sure that most would agree that the procurement and delivery of fresh drinking water and the collection and treatment of sanitary sewage are among the most essential services the village provides to the community. And I'm pleased to share the presentation this evening with Public Works Director Fink. I will cover the financial piece, and Brad will highlight important initiatives, both in next year and in the outlying years, because it's not just an operating fund, it's also a capital fund. And I'll start things off tonight with just a little bit of the historical trend information that we review each year. This first slide is just a boilerplate that I put up every year. It's just a description of how the water and sewer fund is financed, which essentially means it's entirely from rates and charges paid by users of the services rather than through general tax revenues. We see here on this graph roughly 20 years of annual billed consumption to residents and businesses within Carroll Stream. In our current year, fiscal '24, we're seeing actually a slight uptick in projected consumption, about 1.3%. Looking at the last 10 years between fiscal 15 and fiscal 24, consumption has been generally flat. As you can see in the graphic, average sales at about 1.07 billion gallons per year. And during that 10-year period, it fluctuates usually plus or minus 3% every year. So it's been fairly reliable, generally predictable. The steady decline in consumption in the decade prior to that, as you can see from the left side of the graph, is again during a time when rates were rapidly increasing due to substantial cost increases from the city of Chicago. The graph on this slide shows the village's cost of purchasing its water supply from the city of Chicago through the DuPage Water Commission. Costs did begin kind of at part and parcel with the last graph. They began to stabilize in fiscal 15. We have seen some inflationary pressures over the last 3 years. On the right side of the graph, you see it starting to tick up again, ever so gently again. Just as a side note, following the egregious period of Chicago rate, like 15% every year after year, since that time, Chicago now caps their annual increase to the Water Commission by no more than 5% per year, but typically an inflation factor. Our gallons billed to gallons purchased ratio is one that we review every year. It continues to be favorable. For the current year, we estimate we'll bill 93.5 gallons for every 100 gallons we buy from the commission. And so some of the unbilled water loss comes from hydrant flushing, main breaks, and underground system leaks, which we do testing for on an annual basis. All right, right into the proposed budget for fiscal '25. This graphic shows the major expense categories within the water and sewer fund. Perhaps most notable, nearly 50 cents of every dollar that's spent goes toward the purchase of the community's water supply. In terms of rate setting, it's really quite important to capture the full cost of water cost increases each year, generally as a starting point. As you can see, if half the expense is dependent upon adjusting rates to meet the cost of the commodity alone, we probably, if we don't do that, what we're basically doing is paying for those increases through use of reserves. And that, for too long of a time, can really get us into a difficult situation. The operating contract for the wastewater reclamation center is the second largest component, followed by staffing costs mostly for Public Works to monitor and maintain the system on a regular basis. It also includes some of the administrative costs associated with billing and preparing and mailing customer billings each month. These next two slides are a bunch of words that are going to describe a very busy chart that follows on the third slide. So if you wanted to forward to page 12 and look at that, be my guest, or we'll just kind of browse through that really quickly once we get through. On the revenue side, as I mentioned earlier, about 93% of all revenues are based on service rates that are billed out each month. Just a couple of call-outs on the operating revenue side. We have in the chart included the impact of the proposed rate increase, which we'll get to at the conclusion of the presentation. And secondly, we haven't seen this in some time. We have some impact fees that are associated with the new development at Fair Oaks and Lees Road that will be around for the next couple of years as that develops out. Non-operating revenues include things like interest income and telecom tower leases that benefit the system, but they're not tied to rates, and they just supplement revenues. And again, that's about 3% of the total revenues. Lastly, our current year, we transferred $300,000 from general fund surplus revenues, really just to hold back on a rate increase. Last May 1st, we didn't act on rates at all. Because we actually are seeing an increase in uptake in water billed and purchased, we missed the mark a little bit on that $300,000 estimate. Our actual water costs year over year are about $350,000 more, but it's all good. On the operating expense side, this is a bit unusual to see. Salaries and wages, we're showing an 8.1% decrease year over year, budget to budget, due to a number of turnover and some staff positions. So we've certainly lost some long tenured employees during this past year. We're still, I believe, seeking to fill some of those, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll get a little bit of relief there, but with that, we also lose some experience. Secondly, on the water purchases, comparing the fiscal 24 budget to the proposed budget for 25, we have an increase of just showing under 6%, about 5.9% specifically. The Water Commission is proposing a 19-cent rate increase this May 1st, which accounts for 3.5% of that increase. And the balance is really due to the greater than planned water purchases that are coming into the mix that get us to the 5.9%. Our Water Reclamation Center contract includes a projected 2.8% increase, and the contractual services has a fairly sizable reduction of $577,000 due to really what was a multi-year effort of treating and painting our towers, cleaning them up, doing some minor maintenance, and each one of those towers are roughly $600,000. So we've gone through several years of those, and those are finally rolling off. If I'm not mistaken, we've still got one at Jezewski that is getting some paint, Brad, but we're kind of monitoring.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at the interior was all rehabilitated. We're going to power wash the exterior of that one and then just kind of monitor that.
Okay, so we've done a lot of work in the last 3 or 4 years on rehabilitating our towers, so those are in good shape. So we now enjoy a little bit of a break on the operating side. Commodities, in terms of dollars, not a huge increase, about $35,000. Really just to pick up costs of some new diagnostic equipment Brad's going to talk about in a moment, equipping new vehicles and some employee safety equipment. I believe you're looking at a trench box next year. Okay. And again, here's that big kind of boring chart, so hopefully I won't really need to get into too many of the numbers there. Maybe the only call out here is under the proposed budget 25 column at the very bottom of the page. We show we're actually putting $1.75 million into reserves next year for future capital. So that's always key. And as we get deeper into the presentation, you'll see we have years in the red because we're very large on capital projects. And this is a year where we save because our capital component for next year is only $355,000. But that's just warming up for the Headworks project that Brad is going to talk about in a moment. With that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Brad, and he's going to kind of underscore some of the more notable operating expenses and as well as some of the larger, longer-term capital efforts.
Thank you, John. Yeah, the first thing is the hydrant painting program. Everybody's familiar with that. We started that last year. We're in year 2 of the 5-year program. With this funding level, we can paint approximately 500 hydrants per year. That was actually a joint bid, so we achieved a little bit, some economies of scale there. So we're proposing to continue that. The other thing that is notable is that the last couple of years, we've seen a real significant increase in prices of materials, you know, hydrants, valves, flange bolts, everything associated with water main and the water system repair. Third thing is we're proposing to replace and expand the fence that's currently around the Fullerton Water Tower. We're looking, that's under, not in very good shape, and we're looking at not only replacing it, but expanding it a little bit to surround the perimeter of the property. That'll allow us for possibly some additional storage, off-site storage, which is much needed. The other, some more notable expenses, water sampling stations. This is something that we've been looking at for quite a while. We currently have 61 IEPA-approved water sampling locations. Most of them are residential, so sometimes it's very challenging getting having the resident allowing us to take those water samples, and we take anywhere from 30 to 50 samples a month, depending upon what we're testing for. So these samples are these water sampling stations we're proposing to place in the more difficult areas that make it easier for us to obtain those samples. We're also proposing to do purchase a water main leak detection equipment. Currently, we contract that out. It's roughly $23,000 a year to contract that out. We think we can absorb that in-house, so we're looking at the purchase of the equipment and then do that in-house.
The only thing I want to add to that, and Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, not only do we spend the 20,000 plus for leak detection, but we also have staff that goes along with the contractor. So we're spending man hours to do it as well, in addition to the contract, right?
That is correct, yeah. As long as the contractor's in, we have employees with them the entire time. So we thought, well, the employees are already there, why not train them? And we can maybe bring this in-house.
I would imagine the life expectancy for that equipment is more than a couple of years, too.
Yes, that's correct. Moving on, up to some upcoming capital expenses that we're proposing this year that is included in the equipment replacement fund is a pickup truck. Current one is 2011. Obviously, that's towards the end of its useful life, looking at replacing that. And then our much overdue crane truck replacement. Our current one is 2000 GMC. Basically, it's a crane on the back of a flatbed. With this new crane truck, it'll allow us to have a lot more tools on site, and it'll be a little bit bigger crane, allow us a little bit more flexibility in pulling pumps, placing hydrants, things of that nature. Some of the more larger expenses we're looking at, the WRC electrical assessment. Back in 2022, the village performed a complete an assessment of the WRC and allowed us to put together kind of a 5-year, 10-year, 15 and 20-year capital program. One thing that we did not assess was the electrical components. A lot of the transfer switches, you know, they're towards the end of their useful life as well. So we're proposing to do an assessment there so we can incorporate the recommendations in our capital program. Now the big one. As planned and recommended in that assessment, which was completed in 2022, they recommended to rehabilitate the headworks of the treatment plant. Basically, the headworks is just what it sounds like. All of the sanitary sewer in the entire village ends up there first. There are some screw pumps that lift the sewage for it to hydraulically flow through the plant, and then it also filters out the bigger debris, 2x4 shoes, bowling balls, things like that, that come down the pipe. So, yeah, you'd be amazed what we see down there. And listen, the Headworks was originally constructed in 1993, and this operates 24/7. So, it's recommended that we take a look at that a little closer to improve that. The next slide, I'm not going to go through these in detail. However, the purpose of this slide was just kind of give you an idea of, what's coming up, what we're looking at between FY 26 and 31. There's some sizable programs that we're needing to do. So, again, this is just kind of give the board an idea of what we're looking at long term.
Thank you, Brad. This next one is almost a little bit of a rehashing. It's just really kind of a summary slide that really encapsulates a lot of the work at the Wastewater Reclamation Center, as well as some other ancillary items. And the only figure I call out there is we're looking at about $19 million in investment over the next decade. So that's something certainly from a financing standpoint we need to keep our eyes on to make sure that we can raise the capital when the funds are needed for those improvements. And considering the significant capital investment, over the last couple of years, I started doing a 10-year cash flow projection on the fund. The basic assumptions are identified at the bottom of the page. Obviously, it includes the $19 million of already identified capital improvements. It assumes an operating expense inflation of about 2.9% per year, which is really a fairly reliable figure based on past experience. It also incorporates annual aggregate rate adjustments of about 2.5% per year. So as you can see in this projection, you see the numbers in red. Obviously, fiscal 26 is the bulk of the Headworks project. I think we have phosphorus in fiscal 28. So we obviously, and at the top of the presentation, I said we're putting away $1.7 million in fiscal 25. So we'll spend that times 2 in terms of capital investment getting ready for the Headworks project. The long and short of it is cash reserve balances decline or pretty much in half over the 10-year cash flow period. On the rightmost column, I put in our minimum 25% operating reserve that was required just for operations. And so by 2034, essentially, you're required to hold $4.1 million for operations. Of the 8.3, you've got about $4.2 million left for capital at that point in time. And I'm not saying that's either good or bad. A lot happens in 10 years, and a lot of work comes in, and things can tend to evolve a little bit over time. What I am trying to illustrate in this is that the more modest increases that we can plan on a regular basis can really carry us a long way toward making sure that the systems get the attention that they need to stay viable well into the future. Here's our funny graphic. We've had a number of cost pressures that are not built into the 10-year model I just kind of highlighted on the previous page that staff is beginning discussions on in earnest in greater detail. So we've just got our ARP card. The village just turned 65, and the infrastructure underground is continuing to age. Some of the things that staff is discussing that are not funded in this model that will likely they will require attention at some point in time. I guess that's for us to argue at the staff level when and how much. Bill's back there too, so he's part of it too. We're in the final phases of completing the water study and the water model that Engineering and Public Works has been working on for a number of years. And we're starting to talk about a program for a comprehensive water main infrastructure care program. Certainly, and I think the article from Elmhurst was fairly timely in terms of our discussion tonight. I mean, if you've read the article, I think Manager Homer passed it out last week. About 30% of their infrastructure is already in the 100-year-old range, built in the 20s, I believe. And they're targeting an investment of $5 million a year just in water infrastructure, add phosphorus and all that to the mix. And they've got obviously a pretty hefty rate increase that they've already approved that goes into effect very shortly. The next two, the hydrant replacement program and sewer televising program, Brad's going to touch a little bit on what's involved there.
Yeah, sure. You know, our hydrants are not getting any younger. And, you know, as the infrastructure ages, we, you know, kind of have to take the mindset of, you know, in the past when everything's young, you can take more of a reactive approach. As things age, you kind of have to take a more proactive approach. So, you know, we're having internal discussions about, you know, taking a look at physically replacing a number of hydrants each year. The average hydrant lasts between 60 and 70 years, so we're approaching that. And then just the sewer televising program, I know we completed a pretty robust program through Red Zone that initially gave us the condition of our sewers, of the sanitary sewer. But, you know, we're getting to the point where it's probably going to be prudent to do kind of an annual televising program, so we can plan and know, you know, what we have. You know, the Red Zone was great, but it kind of gave us a picture in time at that moment. So as things age, we want to know what's out there, stay on top of it, and then plan accordingly.
I think it's important to add to that, you know, when we talk about staff having discussion about some of this stuff and weighing it out, you know, that's where engineering and public works start to work together a lot and talk about, okay, age of water main, condition of pipe, type of pipe, condition of soil. So if we're replacing a water main, perhaps it's time to replace the hydrants along that length of main. And we try to time that a little bit better. But those two departments are really working in tandem to try to figure out the best timing on some of that stuff.
And they never invite the finance people to those meetings because all they ever hear is how much is this going to cost?
Trustee Gieser, I think, has a question.
Speaking of what Manager Homer just said about, hydrants, you know, you hook up to fight a fire or whatever. Has the technology changed significantly at all?
No.
Okay, it's the same, it's just, but it's just like everything else,
Yes.
everything's going up. So it's not like smart hydrants or anything like that? It's
No.
not- Okay.
No.
They're quite dumb.
Yeah, yeah. Might be a revenue generator to start rolling that out.
So I didn't put any dollars associated with any of these things yet because they're really still kind of in the discussion phase, and we're trying to. I mean, these are things that we'll see at some point in our future. So we want to try and get out ahead of that, and as Manager Homer said, kind of discuss it logically and making sure we're touching it once and doing it all in good order and not kind of haphazardly. So those discussions will continue. Advanced water meter reading, I think I mentioned it I don't know why I mentioned it, but we did a quick survey of DuPage communities through the mayors and managers. I had a suspicion that our method of reading meters was getting aged. I was actually shocked that we're probably trailing most. Most communities have reading equipment on top of their towers. It's a lot more efficient from what I hear. It could actually save labor for Public Works, where our folks interface with Public Works on a daily basis to do final readings and whatnot, and it requires a crew to go out and obtain those. You could do it from a keyboard, conceivably in the finance office, and take care of that. It's not cheap, but again, it's something that I was a little surprised that we're kind of at the lagging end in terms of the technology there. And lastly is probably the most speculative of all of these, the DuPage Water Commission. You've probably heard some information about. They've got an alternative source water project. due to complications they've had with negotiating rates with Chicago. Chicago hasn't been terribly cooperative in terms of negotiating a follow-up contract. As you well know, we signed on for another, was it 20 years or 30 years?
I believe it's actually 17.
Okay, thank you. And it deals with the Joliet that are getting a better rate than member communities. So can we do it better ourselves? No idea at this point. It's very, very speculative, but that's billions of dollars of projects that the entire consortium would have to sign on to, and that would involve probably very large pieces of debt and cost commitments there. So, but in the end of the day, the whole proposal is we think we can do it better on our own. There have been preliminary financial projections that the commission has commissioned. That say it's feasible, but it's very complicated, it's very expensive, and it will take a very long time to build. But we'll just keep that right where it is in the speculative area. Just for reference point, debt is one source we've used very sparingly in the water and sewer fund on a very limited basis. This month will actually complete, actually tomorrow, I may make our final payment on that loan. We took out $6.3 million, and this was a below-market interest rate through the IEPA revolving loan fund at 2.5%. But still, that adds up over 20 years. We've spent $2 million in interest costs, and as a pay-as-you-go community, we like to say we could spend that $2 million on projects that directly benefit residents rather than paying interest on that. And the cost of falling behind, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody here, but these are two recent headlines taken from the Daily Herald. The Illinois American Water is proposing a very large increase, about $24 average monthly increase to a homeowner. They're a private, one of, I think, two private water companies in Illinois. So they're regulated by the ICC, so they have to go and before that commission and get rate approvals. But they've got some massive water infrastructure improvements scheduled. Not sure, I don't know the details on that. But if you're falling that far behind, we have to do a ton of work now. I guess that's kind of the message. And I'm not trying to be disingenuous or unfair to Elmhurst. Every community is different, and their needs are different. They're a much older system, and as you see our graph of communities in DuPage County that have higher than normal average bills and lower, we've fared favorably because we tend to be on the younger side. But I've translated this 66.98 bi-monthly increase to what Carroll Stream has used, a 6,000 gallon per month average bill. That would translate to a $40 increase in Carroll Stream's monthly bill, which is a tremendous increase.
It's fair to say that that's what we're trying to stay away from.
Yeah, I think being planful and keeping our eyes far down the road and seeing those costs. It does take a long time on a pay-as-you-go to raise capital. Nothing happens overnight. So if we see these in our horizon, that's why we're trying to work within this 10-year planning horizon to make sure that we have the funds on hand to make those improvements as they're due. But for this year, what we're proposing for May 1, 2024 is a 40-cent rate increase, and all that does is keep us on pace with the DuPage Water Commission cost increase for the last 2 years. The 19 cents they're proposing for this May and picking up the 21 cents from last year. So that, in a 6,000 gallon per month, translates to $2.40 to the average homeowner each month.
How many houses average 6,000 gallons a month?
That's a great question, which I don't have an answer for you. I could look and see if we can do some stratification to.
I'm just
Give
curious,
that-
because I'm sure like a lot of people, I don't even look at our water bill because we are on auto pay. So I couldn't tell you how many gallons
You're our
are.
favorite type of customer.
I know, that's why I asked this question, because statistics are wonderful, You can make them say anything you want, so I'm just curious what percentage of households use 6,000 gallons. So
I'd like to do a little research on that, if I may.
We'll get you an answer to that.
I appreciate it.
Let's see, we'll ask the munis.
I just want to make
see
sure
if-
that that's a fair metric to use. I mean, if our households are averaging 10,000, then we should be budgeting it based on that. So I'm just curious.
Right.
That's why I asked the question.
It is all over the board, and we have probably a very unique rate structure. You pay for what you use. That's as simple as it gets. If we were to do a rate study, I can almost guarantee you a consultant would say, you need to pay $25 flat every month, even if you don't draw a drop of water. So I like to remind seniors that use very little water, that we come into contact with something, you only pay for what you use. There's no flat fees, no minimums. Yeah, the rate people don't like that. I mean, there is a premise that there are a lot of fixed costs, and there are, with a system just to be ready to serve, whether you draw water or not. So everybody contributes under that philosophy. But in this, it's worked pretty well for us over the years, and it's kept us going pretty well. So if we're okay with that, if there's general consensus, we'll probably have an ordinance before you for consideration at some board meeting in the near future. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Special funds, I could pass on these altogether if you'd like. I don't really have much to say. Police pension fund is not insignificant. They've been in and out of these $70 million total assets. We've had two fairly poor years of investment return, negative 4.1% in fiscal '22 and a paltry 1.9% last year. So the market has not been kind. Despite that, funding ratio has increased from about 66.8% to just over 70.5%. I think some of that has to do with the generous donation the board made, the supplemental contribution last fiscal year of $6.2 million. I have good news to report. The market, and you're probably all seeing this in your 457s or whatever retirement plans you have too, but the first 9 months of the current fiscal year have been quite good. We've earned 77.5% on our assets, almost $5 million in new money into the fund, again, following that extended market drought. For the investment fund that manages those funds, from inception now we're at 6.25%, which is only about 0.25% lower than our assumed rate of assumption return of 6.5%. So, and I think another happy consequence of that additional supplemental contribution last year is our operating increase for next year is only 1.5% from the current year, which is helpful in smoothing some of those costs out. And lastly, just as a side note, the pension board did approve all of the benefit payments are now outsourced to an accounting firm that we've dealt with over the years. The plan has gotten quite large, 55 current beneficiaries, annual benefit payments of almost $5 million. So it's getting to be real money. So that's a big help to us. I mean, we've really enjoyed sending those checks out to our retirees, and we still interface with them as much as we can. But the accounting firm now is going to be, getting all the love for mailing out the checks. So.
And they appreciate them, I'm sure.
There's not a whole lot to say about the TIF. It's doing its thing. We're in probably the last 5 years of that. As of last fiscal year, we've paid almost $1 million in principal on the $3.5 million original note. We're not going to hit that by year 15, and that's okay. We're not obligated for anything beyond that 15-year period under the current redevelopment agreement. But the developer has received $2.2 million roughly since inception in principal and interest payments. So it's worked quite well. The development continues to be very healthy and viable, and it was an absolutely great investment in the eastern entryway to the village. And the other couple, I just put the names of the other two funds just to make it complete. You've actually heard a lot of the Purchases, Brad covered those vehicle purchases. Those come out of actually the equipment replacement fund.
We gotta quit giving Public Works money. They spent far too much money in the last.
Dump trucks are getting awfully expensive, aren't they?
So you're gonna need to rethink your budget.
They've been put to task, actually. We're asking some questions about how much does it take? So, we'll look forward to that in the next budget cycle. And the state and federal asset seizure funds are controlled pretty much exclusively by the police department. We have a drone program coming, chief, from the state? Okay. I think that's a key focus, that, discussion point that we had talked about for possible uses of some of those funds. But that's all I had this evening. March 18th, we're trying to get this thing fast-tracked, so our goal is to have budget approval on April 1st, which puts us a meeting cycle ahead,
Any questions, Jeff?
seeing as it's been busy.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. We normally wait until the last meeting in April, so we think we can get it done in first.
Joe, any questions? No questions, we're good.
All good?
Well done.
Okay.
Very well.
So we wanna make a motion?
A motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by trustee Anselmo, seconded by trustee Frisolini. Clerk?
Trustee Anselmo.
Aye.
Trustee Berger.
Aye.
Trustee Zalick.
Aye.
Trustee Gizer.
Aye, aye.
Trustee Frizzaloni.
Aye.
Trustee McCarthy. Workshop started at 7:25. Cancer surgery. It's nothing major, I just have to have it removed. So, I don't know, did you have to take it in the past when?
Yeah, I've done it, like,
Yeah, I thought so, so, I mean.
I have the sheets, so.
Yeah, did you have these, I use this just to
Yeah,
track.
I have a copy of that.
Okay, you do, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a bad copy, but,
No, it's
if you
okay.
need any more, I can shoot the
Yeah.
spreadsheet I use, whatever, but you got
I
a
have
copy,
it.
okay, yeah, if you don't mind doing the minutes. Okay, thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's not executive session, but you know what, usually Denise is the one who gets the tape of the executive session, because you don't usually go to, I mean, you don't normally, so I don't know if you'll be going to it. But I'll ask, if they do have executive session next time, I'll ask Denise to draft those.
Yeah.
Using the tape that Bill gets from that meeting, so, okay, but thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
No, you were gonna take the folders?
Yeah.
I don't have to.